All right, today we're jumping into something that's, well, it's pretty tricky. We're talking about safeguarding apprentices. And you might be asking, why is it so complex? Well, it's because they're basically living a double life, professionally speaking. They've got one foot in your training world and the other firmly planted in their employer's workplace.
Yeah, let's really get into this. This quote, it just nails it. It's not just one environment we're talking about, it's two. And each one has its own vibe, its own rules, its own risks. And you're kind of the choreographer in the middle of it all. So let's actually break down what these two worlds look like. Because honestly, if we're gonna do a good job of keeping our learners safe, we've got to get our heads around the tightrope they're walking pretty much every single day.
Okay, and this is where it gets really clear just how tricky this is. You've got the training environment on one side, right? That's your turf. You know the rules, you've got the support systems in place, it's all governed by education law, you're in control. But then, you've got the employer's world, and that's a whole different ballgame. It's shaped by its own unique culture, run by HR and line managers, and that's where the apprentice is spending the bulk of their time. That's their day-to-day.
So let's zoom in on that employer's world for a minute. The risks there, they often go way beyond what you'd find on a typical health and safety checklist. We're talking about something deeper, their psychological well-being.
Now look, every employer has these basic duties, for sure. A physically safe place to work, decent supervision, a clear way to report stuff, that's the absolute minimum. But here's the thing, that's just the starting line. Just because those boxes are ticked doesn't mean it's a truly safe place, especially when you think about the risks you can't easily see. And this is so important to get. A workplace can pass every physical safety inspection with flying colors and still be a deeply unsafe place for an apprentice. Think about it. If the culture is full of off-color jokes, if managers are constantly putting people down, or if there's just this insane pressure all the time, how can they possibly learn and grow without being afraid? And we've got to be real about the power imbalance here too. You know, these apprentices are often young, this might be their first proper job, and they are desperate to make a good impression. That right there puts them in a pretty vulnerable spot compared to an established manager or a longtime colleague. And that fear, it is a massive barrier. An apprentice might put up with some pretty awful stuff, being talked down to, belittling comments, maybe even harassment, because they're just terrified that if they say anything, they'll lose their apprenticeship. They don't want to cause trouble. You see, their biggest vulnerability isn't that they're new. It's the fear of losing this one huge opportunity.
So, where do you come into all this? Well, your job is to be the bridge connecting those two worlds. And the best tool you have to do that? It's something we call professional curiosity.
Now, this isn't about you turning into some kind of detective. Not at all. It's about being a really engaged, empathetic listener. It starts with just asking some gentle, open-ended questions. Then you really listen, not just to the words, but to what's going on underneath them, the subtext. You notice little shifts in their confidence in how they carry themselves. And, of course, you know exactly what to do and who to talk to if a concern pops up.
And these questions, they look pretty simple, don't they? But they are so incredibly powerful. They're not accusatory, they're just conversation starters. Just asking, what's the team atmosphere like? Or tell me about the support you get, can open up this little window into what their world is really like without making them feel like they're being interrogated.
Okay, now for the interesting part. Let's talk about decoding what apprentices are actually saying. Because a lot of the time, the real story is buried in what they aren't saying out loud. So an apprentice might say this, it's just busy all the time. And hey, maybe it is just busy. But it could also be code for I am completely on my own here, or I'm drowning and nobody has a second for me. That professional curiosity is what helps you gently dig a little deeper. Whoa, okay, this one is a huge red flag. When you hear an apprentice say something like this, it tells you they're starting to accept behavior that is completely unacceptable. They've started to believe that getting shouted at is just normal, part of the job. And it's so important that you're the one to let them know, no, it's really not. And here's a really sharp listening skill to work on. Listen for the minimizing words. Words like just, only, it's nothing really. When an apprentice says, oh, it's just banter, or it's nothing really, they are very often pushing down something that is actually making them feel pretty bad. Let's look at these two scenarios. In hospitality, a manager shouting, that's a pretty clear-cut problem, right? It's going to cause anxiety. But in manufacturing, it's more subtle. It's just banter, but it might actually be really humiliating. Both situations need you to be curious to figure out what's really going on for that apprentice.
So, what's the answer? Well, it's not for you to march in and become the workplace police. The real solution is to build a really strong, open partnership with the employer.
And this chart really lays it out. Your role is all about the educational, safeguarding the pastoral side of things. The employer, they handle the HR stuff, performance, on-the-job safety. The roles are different, but they absolutely have to be connected. The key takeaway here is that it's a shared responsibility. And what links it all together is good, consistent communication. So here's the bottom line. This isn't a handover. You don't just drop the apprentice off at the employer's door and cross your fingers. It's an ongoing partnership. Both of you are responsible for making sure that learner has an environment where they can actually thrive. And that's really what this is all about. Safeguarding isn't just about putting out fires when things go wrong. It's about building a culture, both in your world and with your employer partners, where every single apprentice feels safe. Safe enough to learn, safe enough to mess up sometimes, and safe enough to grow. So I'll leave you with this question. The next time you sit down with one of your apprentices, what's that one small thing you're going to listen for a little more closely? What's that one subtle sign you'll be on the lookout for? The one that might just tell you the real story of what it's like for them in that other world.